good place to be out there. Once again, my name is B.W. Lee. I'm a senior field researcher from the Mid-American Bigfoot Research Center. Our next speaker is Scott. How do you say that, Scott? Shuby? Okay, Scott Shuby. He's also known as Scotto in all the Bigfoot forums. He's also the vice chair of the AIVR, which is the Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers. He's going to give a talk today about the importance of turning in sighting reports. Without sighting reports, there's a lot of things that we can get from it. We're going to talk about that. So I'm going to turn it over here to Scott and let him get with it.
Thank you, Bud. Hey, everybody. My name is Scotto, and I'm with the AIVR. This is Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers, and there's a lot of good groups out there to report your sighting to, which is, he said that my talk today is the importance of reporting sightings. I know there's been a lot of people who see these creatures for years, and a lot of people just don't come forward about it. They just don't want to talk about it. But it's very important that we get all this information down because they may be going extinct. We don't feel that they're being seen quite as often as they used to be. And that's going to be a problem. So we don't know exactly where they go. We don't know if they migrate. Some people say that they use the streams, they use the rivers. They could even use the railroad tracks. You see all the timber all along the railroad tracks. But this area has been a hotbed of Sasquatch activity and sightings for quite some time. I talked with quite a few people, including the Native American people, about sightings here, in an area radiating out about 50 miles in either direction. I live over just east of Mena, Arkansas, and I got stuff going on over there in my own backyard. And when it first started happening, I kind of denied it. I said, well, I'm a Bigfoot researcher. What makes me think I got this stuff? It's got to be something else going on. And I had a good friend who had a full-fledged sighting in daytime high noon about 2 weeks ago. Her husband was out cutting wood, and she went out to bring him something to drink, and she looks up, and about 150 yards away was this tall creature, about 6 foot tall. She said it was kind of skinny, but it had really long, shiny black hair, and she saw it take 4 steps. And she said it walked with a very weird stride, almost like its knees wouldn't bend, like its knees would walk, which she thought was weird. And she also saw a juvenile about 2 years ago, and we actually cast a track of that. It was very small, and she said the thing ran like an upright monkey with no tail. It was very fast, it was not stooped over, and it was bothering her by just hitting rocks together and just watching when she'd get it come outside, it would stop. And then she hit around the shed, and she actually saw it get up and run from where it was. What started me out in this whole thing was when I was about 18 years old. I grew up a little further up north, and I was hunting and fishing and traveling the whole time I was a kid. And I had heard of Bigfoot, but I just thought it was kind of like the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, all that type of stuff. I hunted this particular piece of woods that was about 150 acres. It was a long strip. I didn't have permission to do the whole part. It was all broken up into parcels, but I had permission to do probably, say, 9 out of the 12 parcels. And one night, I was with a friend of mine, and it was near the end of coon season, and it had been real cold outside. It probably had been about 15 degrees, and there was snow on the ground, and it warmed up to be about, I'd say about 34. And any hunter knows that when you've had a cold snap and it warms up, all the animals come out. And so we started at the very front of the woods, one parcel, and it was about a 2.5 mile walk to the back. And the snow had melted, and it was real dark outside, and so we were walking on all these leaves, pretty much not making a sound. We didn't see any deer. We'd always see a skunk or a possum running around. We didn't see anything. And this guy was a big Harley biker guy. He wasn't afraid of anything. We get to the very back of the woods, and we're like, what's the deal? So we sit down, we smoke a cigarette, and we're talking real quietly. We're like, what's going on? And this thing off to my right, maybe 40 yards at the most, screamed. Well, I was wearing my pants, and he almost did something similar, and he jumped up like a little screaming schoolgirl and said, let's get at it. And I was like in shock. I was like, no way did that just happen. what was there? And it almost sounded like the sound was directed at us, and it was almost coming more from the chest than the throat type of sound. It was more of a guttural scream. And we didn't have any cougar, we didn't have any bear in the area, anything like that. And I was familiar being in the woods and camping out there, and I'd never seen anything for all those years. And so he said, let's go, man, let's get out of here. Now I don't want to watch the woods, let's go in this pasture where all these crazy bulls are. I said, well, we don't know what it was. And it did it again. It screamed again, and this time it sounded like its head was turned, and it was hollering towards a little wildlife preserve that was sitting about maybe a mile off, and something answered it. And that's when I said, time to go. So we walked all the way around to the bulls and came home. And that was when I was 18. Didn't know what it was. I didn't think Bigfoot or anything. I just put it out of my head. And flash forward to when we had moved to Florida, and I was about 27 years old, and my son was in school, and they said, you got to get him a computer. This was when computers were fairly new, and email and all this was coming out. I don't know anything about computers, and I said, all right. So we get him a computer, and he just wants to play video games on it, whatever. So one night he goes to bed, Mama goes to bed, and I'm sitting in there, and one of my first experiences on the internet, I'm just kind of surfing, and I'm just looking around, and you know how one thing leads to another. And it led to a Bigfoot forum page. I'm like, oh, they got sounds of these things. Huh? So I started listening to them, and one of them sounded exactly like the one I heard, and it just about freaked me out. But I didn't know how to save it to my favorite place, and didn't know anything about Earl or anything like that, so I tried to find it the next night for my wife and my son. I still don't know where it is, even though I've heard ones that are very close to it. So, flash forward about 15 years, and that's where I am now, and I read every book I could on the subject. And one thing that I found out around the same time was really strange. This all happened, I can't remember if it was 2 weeks before or after or something, when that scream happened. The guy we lived right next to was kind of an old curmudgeon type of guy who didn't want anyone in his woods. I could hunt it, but with only strict permission, and I had to call him on the phone and say, can I hunt today? It wasn't, can I hunt maybe sometime next week? No, he didn't know exactly when I was back in the woods. So he calls up, he's a Mandarin Hornet, and he wants to know why some idiot is walking barefoot around his pond this time of year. He thought it was me because I wear size 13 shoes. And it wasn't me, and I hadn't put any of this together yet, obviously. I was only 18. I wish I would walk back there and take a look at these tracks. But it was right around the same time also that I had been cutting through there. I think it was just before that. And I found a dead deer wedged up in a tree. And it was a doe. And her head was stuck up about the size of one of these lights were. And there were no other branches where somebody could climb out there. There was no sign, no footprints, no ladder marks. And her neck was broken. She wasn't shot, nothing. And her head was stuck in a tree. And so I thought that was pretty strange. And I didn't find out until later that some people suspect that Bigfoot maybe cached their prey to keep it away from the coyotes and whatnot. So that's kind of what got me going on to this whole thing. And as for physical evidence, so what do we have now? This month is the 40-year anniversary of the famous Patterson-Gimlin film. Patty Luther was taken in Buck Creek, California in 1967. That is the best piece of footage that we know of yet. I think, and a lot of other people think, that somebody else out there has got something that's probably better than that and hasn't come forward with it yet. Pictures, we got some grainy pictures, nothing real good, nothing that's conclusive proof. You know, people say, well, that could be a guy in a monkey suit, that could be the accidental bear, that could be anything. We don't know what that is. We got some other videos that are so-so, nothing as good as that. Let's see, sounds, we've got a lot of sounds that are reported. A lot of them have been determined no known living creature that we know of. Undocumented sound. There's a lot of them on websites. There's some on CDs. Some of them they got playing right out here. There's screams or howls, all different kinds of things. And then we have cats. Some of the cats we have, I have a very large cat collection. I have about 55 of them. We have some cats that supposedly show dermal ridges, which are like fingerprints. This is the Onion Mountain cat that was taken in August of 1967 by John Green. There's a couple books for sale back there that farm has for sale that have pictures of these cats in here, and so they think these are normal ridges like fingerprints, but we're not positive yet because we don't have a dead guy to walk up to and say, oh yeah, they match. We don't have anything like that yet. That's what we're looking for. There's one example. Probably one of the best casts taken of a foot cast. This one that was taken by Sheriff and Terrier. And this one looks like a very large human footprint. This was taken at a place called Abbott Hill in Grays Harbor County, Washington State in 1982. It's about the best cast we have today. If anyone wants to see these later, come on and ask us what to do. You can see the detail in this little ridge back here. And there's all sorts of casts. We've got the scooping cast that some people think is an elk print. Some people think it's a Sasquatch print. I have a copy of a portion of that print, and it doesn't look like an elk to me. But I haven't seen the whole cast in person either. Hair. People have found and submitted hair from all over the world. We have a scientist called Dr. Hunter Fehrenbach, who has probably the biggest collection of hair, but he even calls it reported Sasquatch hair because we don't have a Sasquatch that compared to it, yeah, it's the same thing. But they've done DNA tests on the hair, which is real hard to do because most of the DNA is in the root of the hair follicle. And it doesn't match human, and it doesn't match gorilla, it's somewhere in between. And outside of that, we've got a lot of stories from people. A lot of stories, they've gone back, we've got newspaper clippings from the early 1800s, hairy man saw in the woods, chased by Indians and trackers, and we got a lot of stories. A lot of them have been told to me personally. We had, during that big ice storm we had here quite a few years ago, there's a police officer just north of Mena, somewhere between Mena and Walden. He was the chief of police. You got a call on the radio that there was a big branch that the ice had knocked down and laying across the road. He happened to be riding with a prominent lawyer in the area. And this is about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They were asked, hey, can you go move this branch? It's blocking traffic. So him and the lawyer go move it. And standing right there behind the tree when they got there is what the police officer said could only have been a Sasquatch. And this is a guy who's been hunting. A guy who's been in the woods his whole life. And this is what, part of the research that frustrates me more than anything. A lot of you people are hunters. A lot of people know what bear looks like. And when somebody says, a pencil pusher behind the desk, that, oh, they're not out there, they're not real, you saw a bear. You know what bears look like. You know what bears are capable of. Bears can stand up on 2 feet. Black bear maybe even take a step or two, sort of awkward like, but it's not going to take 8 or 10 foot strides. It's not going to walk straight up a mountain on 2 feet. They're not bears out there. And you tell me somebody who's been in the woods their whole life, who's trapped, hunted, maybe been a lumberjack, and they report this and they were told there was a bear, that's going to make them mad. That's going to make a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to talk about that. And that's what we're having a lot of today in certain areas. And that's just, it's killing research groups like us, people that don't want to come forward and say, look, I've seen something. My dad saw something. My grandma saw something years ago when she's out picking muscadines. And these are the stories we need. Even if it's an old story, we need something. So if you know anyone who has a story, if you have one yourself, you can remain totally anonymous. We've got a lot of good groups out there. AIVR is one of them. The BFRO is another one. They're probably the largest group right now that's running around. They're always doing expeditions. If anyone's going to find this thing, they could be there. We got a lot of Earls. If you have a report, you can go to BigfootResearch.com, BFRO.net, SasquatchOnline.com. If you go to BFRO.net, you can read the database, and there you can pick it out for the state, for your county. They have the biggest online database. You can read all the reports. They separate them between Class A and Class B encounters. The Class A would be, you saw one, and the Class B is you found a print, or you heard something, or you saw something, you couldn't really put it in there. But Class A is the real deal. And they have a lot of reports for both A and B. So that'd be a good thing for somebody to go to some of these websites, go to the AIVR site. I'm the vice chair of the AIVR, and we're kind of in our infancy right now. We've only been going on for about 3 years. kind of set up. We had an Operation Odyssey out in California a couple months ago. It was hosted by Bob and Kathy Strain and a bunch of other AVR members who put this together. And it was kind of like a research group. So people, if they saw a track, would know how to cast it, to help them take pictures, properly gather evidence, which is all very important. Like, say tracks, for example. If something's out found in the mud behind your house, or if you find a track, it's in the dirt, it's going to get ruined if it gets rained on. If you don't have the plaster to copy it right away, cover it up with something. If you got a garbage can lid, if you got a piece of wood, piece of plywood, put over it so it doesn't get rained on. And mix the plaster up, but don't mix it up to where it's going to be kind of falling through your hand like muck. Make it a little runnier than you would think, so it's going to fill all the toes. You're going to get as much detail as you can. And after you leave it sit out there until it's completely hard, when you can put your finger on the back and not scratch it too bad, lift it out with the dirt and everything underneath it. Bring it inside your house and leave it sit in your house for a day or two. Don't even touch it. Don't even try to clean it, or you're going to ruin some of the detail that's on the front. And then brush it off, and then contact one of us so we can come out here and take a look at it. If any of you saw anything, come get a business card from me. I'm going to have a bunch sitting back here with my friends. We got some of these AIBR shirts if you're interested in getting one of those. But we need people to come forward with their sighting. You can remain completely anonymous. We don't even need your address. An area would be fine, like you saw it off of Route 4 out here, or you saw it somewhere. We try to get what the creature looked like, the color, size, approximation, time of day, time of year, which direction it was traveling, what was it doing, what did its arms look like, was its hair long, was it short? Any sighting, if your grandma had one 30 years ago, because I can picture a big map of Oklahoma or Arkansas, and have little red pins on that map, wherever there was a sighting, whenever it was, and so the time of year, we can tell if they migrate, because they do use the creeks. And so we can get some kind of information all put together to say, well, this time of the year, they're more likely seen here. This time of the year, they're more likely seen here. So we can flood an area with photo traps, with night vision camera, to try to get some good evidence. There's been paintings in caves. The back of my shirt is called the Hairy Man pictograph. I was taken inside a cave out west that a friend of mine researches. The Native American peoples, they had names for it. Sasquatch is actually not a real Indian word. Most people don't know that. That word was coined in 1921, but probably came off a different name. The Indians have a lot of names, and one that's close to that is Tasakwa. We also have Smilik, Siatik, Oma, which all mean different things to different tribes. But it's kind of incredible when you've got Indian tribes that are spread all the way across the whole continent, and the First Nations people up in Canada, all the way down to Mexico, and that each tribe would have a name for this creature. They were mythical. They were very well respected, whether the name meant Boss of the Woods, or it meant Hairy Man, or Stick Man, or Big Brother. Each tribe had a name for it, and they were just as real to them as the bear, as the elk. They were just another animal, so to speak, in the woods. And they even carved them in British Columbia. They even have the ape faces in the totem pole. And how do they know what an ape looks like? There's never been a confirmed ape in North America ever. How would they even know what an ape would look like? And here you've got totem poles, hundreds and hundreds of years old, but clearly an ape face there. Last year, probably about this time of year, we got a phone call from a 72-year-old lady that lived in Old Dallas, which is just south of Reno. She was driving through there about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this creature was stopped and standing right in the middle of the road when she came around the corner. And it scared her to death. She's sure a little old lady the type that when you're behind the drive, you can only see knuckles, And she had to back up to get away from it because it didn't move, and then she saw it walk through the woods. So here's a 72-year-old lady that's not making this up, that's talking to my friend Louisa that can hardly talk. She's shaking so bad. She's just scared to death. She started talking about it, and some of her neighbors came up to her and said, hey, we really don't want to talk about it. She's like, why? That's what I saw. I said, yeah, no, we really don't want to talk about that. Well, that's the kind of stigma we got to get rid of. People need to talk about it. Your name doesn't need to be broadcast. I'm I'm not going to tell you her name. I don't even remember her name. And her name is not on any piece of paperwork anywhere in the system. The report is up there. It doesn't give her address. It just gives the road where it is. But that's one piece of puzzle. That's just one. We need more pieces. And more people to come forward to give us a little bit more. You know, if your grandpa said, man, here's a go goddamn things to clear out here right here. Well, we need to hear that. There's an old lady that's in a nursing home meeting right now. They gave her a report to my friend who said we can publish it, but only when she passes on. She lived about 6 miles from where I do now, or along the Washita River. She saw this preacher for years. Her dad used to feed it. He set food out every night. So she gets married, and her husband comes to live with her mom and dad. So she's listening to his father-in-law say all this stuff. We ain't got no feed preacher now. He thought he was dipping in the moonshine, or he was just lost. Well, he saw the thing himself. The next day, him and his wife moved. And he was a hardcore hunter. And you're not going to tell me some country boy, some hardcore hunter, is going to be so scared of something like that that it's going to cause him to move the next day. I have a very good friend of mine that was on a Talamina Drive. Just came over, just where it crosses over Polk County to LaFleur County. There's no logging trail that goes down in there. Him and a very prominent businessman in Mina, and he won't tell me who, because the guy said, don't you ever tell anybody I saw this with you. They were driving through and they were spotting deer. This was about 8 years ago. And when they were driving through, they saw some deer running. And they were coming down the hill. And they were just kind of counting them, watching the bucks. They were stopped there in the truck, and he said, then all the deer turn around and start running back the other way. And I'm like, what are the deer doing this for? And they look down there, and here is an 8-foot-tall, hairy black creature standing behind a tree. It scared them deer right back up that hill. And the guy freaked out. That was Don's second sighting. The guy who he was with flipped out. Said, don't you ever tell anybody I saw this. I thought this was all about you. And that is one of the squashy areas I've ever been to. Anyone who's ever been down in there on the logging trails, there's caves way down in there. There's ropes that you would need to take ropes and not really rappel, but use it to help you walk down in there. The terrain is so steep. A friend of mine came over to my house for something not Bigfoot related about 2 months ago. We were kind of internet buddies, you know, even though he was relatively close to me. He walks in my office, so I was going to show him something on the computer, and the first thing he sees is this whole wall of cats. Comes into my office. He said, are those what I think they are? I didn't even know you did that. I said, well, yeah, they're Bigfoot cats. It's part of my thing. So his wife came with him. She said, tell him. He said, what? She said, tell him. I said, look, if you got something to tell me, tell me. If you don't feel like sharing it, then don't share it. So we did what we had to do on the computer, and then we went outside. And he said, well, I saw something. He said, I was back from the woods. And I looked up, and it looked like a football player in a black ghillie suit. He was staring at me from behind a tree, behind an oak tree, and it was just weaving back and forth behind this tree. And he had a 45 on his side. He calls it a snake gun. He always carries it with him. He picked it up and pointed it at him and he yelled at him, hey, USOB, this is my property. You're on my property. He said it was maybe about 80 yards away, and the thing was just swaying back. He said, this is the big drunk hillbilly in a ghillie suit that's going to get shot. And then it turned around and walked away from him, keeping the tree between him and my friend, and walked straight through this patch of briars and prickers, like it wasn't even there. And he said he could hear that thing snapping sticks and logs. It was just unbelievable, man. Never saw anything like that. He told me that story. And then the story I told him right after that, he said, oh, I know where you live. You live right next to this lady who's in a nursing home now, right by the Washita River. And I told him everything I just told y'all. So the first thing I did, I don't know how many people have seen this. Legend Meets Sasquatch. It's probably the best DVD out there you can get. It's got the full footage of that, uncut, Paris film. And Jeff Melvin wrote a companion to this. It's got a good cast gallery, shows a lot of cast, a lot of great information. And I think this is like $23, something like that. And this is excellent. This would be an excellent thing to get. This book right back here, or on something back there too, Meet the Sasquatch by Chris Murphy. It's got an awesome cast gallery in here. This is a good, another good one to get. But I let him watch his Let Him Meet Science. He brought that to me. He brought it back here the next day and he said, man, that's what I saw. That was it. So I know they're out there. Last year, I started hearing noises, howls. It almost sounded like a woman screaming. I'm surrounded by the Washita Mountains all the way around me. I have a creek that runs behind my house, which is kind of like it drops off almost like a ravine where it's wet year round and it runs across from me, across the road, and goes right down into the Washita River. I was hearing these screams. And I heard it and I'm like, what is that? And of course I'm thinking Bigfoot, but I'm denying it. I'm like, no. And the more I heard it, it was running through my mind, what is that? And it sounded like a woman screaming, but it sounded like she would have been about a 1,200-pound woman, maybe 9 or 10 feet tall. She was screaming for so long and so loud and with so much air volume, I was in denial about it until I finally said, I gotta get this on tape. And I went inside and I don't even have any decent sound recorders. I thought, oh, I got a camcorder. Slapped the tape in there, turned it on, walked out the front door here, record, set it down on the ledge, and I never heard another sound. That's the way it always goes. But then my son comes up to me about a week later at night. Unfortunately, we all smoked a cigarette, so he was standing outside, just smoking a cigarette, standing in the backyard, and a rabbit comes running up right next to his stand right by his foot. He's like, what is a rabbit? Rabbit is just there. So my son is smoking a cigarette, wanting to know why we have retarded rabbits, and all of a sudden this rock comes flying in. Boom! Lands right to the rabbit. And nobody lives behind me for probably 3/4 of a mile. My son is the youngest kid that I know of in our area, and he's going to be 21 in January. There's no little kids. There's nothing back there. Plus, I'm always shooting, popping guns off, so the neighbors know, don't go around that nut's house. So then, another rock comes in and scares the rabbit about another 6 feet away. So my son was getting kind of weirded out, throws his cigarette, goes back in the house and tells me all about this. So next night, he goes outside to walk the dog. Here's another rock coming in. So I go outside there with him. And if this wouldn't have happened to me, I never would have believed it. Right where this barbed wire fence kind of bisects our property in the back, probably about 60 yards from the creek. We're standing by the fence, and you can hear a rock come through the tree. And then something else comes through the tree, and it didn't sound as big as a rock, but I could see in the moonlight. I picked it up, and it was a stick about the size of a broom handle that was broken off about 3 or 4 inches long. And then here it comes. There must have been 2 or 3 things throwing stuff at us. And this lasted for probably about 2 or 3 minutes, and they threw, without exaggeration, at least 200 things at us. And I went out and picked a whole bunch of them up, and all the rocks were perfectly clean, like they came from the creek. If you go out in your front yard and pick up a rock, there's going to be schmegma stuck all on one side from the ground. There's going to be dirt or something on it. All these rocks are clean, like they came from the creek. And we were just standing there in disbelief as these things were just raining down. We didn't get hit by one of them. And then a couple nights later, I saw some other rocks come in. One rock was so big that an NFL quarterback would have a hard time throwing this thing 100 feet, and this thing came from probably about 150 yards away. They're out there throwing rocks. I've heard tree knocking. I've knocked once, only got one response, but they only fell for it one time. Maybe I'm not doing it right. So we do have a lot of stuff going on in our house. We got a lot of stuff going on in this county. We got lots of stuff going on in the surrounding counties. They've been here for a long time. They've been here for years and years and years before any of our ancestors were here. The Indians knew about it. And there's a whole lot of groups out there right now trying to prove the existence of this thing, trying to come up with a better piece of film than that. We think somebody's got probably some better film than that. We probably got really good pictures too. We're asking them to come forward. If you have something like that, please share it with us. You'll be kept anonymous. If you have any evidence at all, if you know of any stories, take my business card. Go to Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers. Go to Sasquatch Research Initiative, SOI. Go to the BFRO. Just go somewhere and report it, please. Help us solve this mystery. Help us find